This is a presentation on Chapter 14, Leadership and Management by Cathy and Delano. Early philosophies in leadership focused on what are called trait theories. Trait theories were beliefs that leaders were born and not made. They were beliefs that leaders were born with traits such as personality characteristics, physical attributes, appearance, or were of a certain age that helped them influence the wills of others. Over time, these views and beliefs have evolved to bring us what we now know as behavioral theories of leadership. More recent research has shown that no one particular physical or personal trait distinguishes successful leaders from unsuccessful ones. Three major studies shape the way we look at behavioral theories today. The first of these studies are the Lewin studies, conducted by psychologist Kurt Lewin. Lewin identified three basic styles of leadership: the autocratic style, which is directive and controlling. There is low tolerance for ambiguity, and employees have very little influence in matters. The democratic style. This style is collaborative and inclusive and fosters creativity. The leader is ultimately responsible for operations, yet employees have a high degree of influence. The laissez-faire style. This is essentially non-leadership. Role ambiguities, chaos, failure to define work goals, responsibilities, and outcomes ultimately lead to failure. The Ohio State studies were conducted in the 1940s and looked at behaviors of leaders. They found two underlying dimensions of leadership behaviors. Initiating structure. This is when leaders identify and organize work processes and establish patterns to achieve business outcomes. But the other behavior is consideration, where leaders' behavior is aimed at nurturing collaborative workplace relationships. A leader can rank low or high in either or both of these behaviors. During the 1950s, the Michigan studies found that more successful leaders adopt a more hands-off approach. They direct firm policies at higher levels and leave the details to subordinates. These leaders are called transformational leaders. In contrast, transactional leaders tend to be micromanagers focused on tasks, rewards, and punishments. Psychology researchers Robert Blake and Jane Moten developed the managerial grid as yet another behavioral interpretation of leadership. The y-axis represents concern for people and interpersonal relationships. The x-axis represents concern for output, cost-effectiveness, and profit. A good leader scores high on both axes. This is a closer view of different management styles on the managerial grid. These styles include country club, authority obedience, impoverished, organization man, and team manager. As we talk about leadership styles and think about how they apply to the food service industry, we have to take into account that there are a large variety of business models out there. Not every style produces the same results in each. Contingency theories take unique situations and settings into account. Fielder's contingency theory separates leader styles into two types: task-oriented and relationship-oriented. It then separates situations into three dimensions of favorableness: task structure, which refers to clarity of roles, policies, and procedures; position power, which is gained through formal authority; and leader-member relations. Situations are considered favorable when good leader-member relationships exist. Figure 14.2 in the book discusses the path-goal theory. This theory sees the leader's primary focus as clearing a path so employees can reach their goals. The path-goal theory speaks of four different styles: directive, supportive, participative, and achievement-oriented. Different employees will require different styles. The leadership member exchange theory states that leaders do not treat all employees the same. Employees with positive attitudes and good track records will gain trust from leaders, and in turn may be given more responsibilities. Employees like this will become the leader's in-group. Employees that do not exhibit the same characteristics become the out-group. The final contingency theory is depicted by the situational leadership model. This model shows us styles used to communicate with employees of different maturity levels. In this chart, employee maturity is divided into 4 levels, 1 being immature and 4 being the most mature. It then goes to show different styles used to communicate with each level, using telling style, selling style, participating style, and delegating style. Peter Drucker, who was considered the father of modern management and wrote the book The Practice of Management in 1954, wrote that the era of the intuitive manager has ended. He then listed 7 new tasks that future leaders must embrace, which are manage by objectives, take more risks and for longer period, make strategic decisions, build an integrated team wherein each member is capable of managing and measuring his own performance, communicate information quickly and clearly, motivating as he goes, see business as a whole, integrating its many parts, and relate the business products or service to the total environment, including in his field of vision economic, political, and social developments in other markets on the global basis. Almost 50 years later, Drucker offered another set of predictions about the leader of the future. In his 1998 Forbes article, he noted that future leadership will not conform to any one style or theory of leadership. He concluded that in the near future, managers will not succeed by merely managing people. They must lead, but they must do so by capitalizing on the strengths of followers. In some cases, leadership can be substituted by employee experience, ability, and training. If a task is very satisfying to an employee and the associated feedback is positive, there is no need for leadership. The newest evolutionary stage in leadership is service leadership. Here, the leader seeks to support and empower employees, or lead by serving others. This calls for the leaders to be flexible and adapt to situations they face. Servant leaders are motivated by the desire to serve and empower, and their primary focus is on developing employees as an end in itself. Here again we see that leadership and management are not entirely the same. Leadership brings about beneficial changes, enhancing the experience for all, whereas management has 4 distinct functions: planning, organizing, directing, and controlling. Table 14.2 in the book gives us more characteristics of managers versus leaders. Where managers administrate, leaders innovate. Where a manager may ask how and when, a leader might ask what and why. And as Peter Drucker says, managers do the right thing while managers do things right while leaders do the right thing. Figure 14.4 shows the distribution of a manager's time. These include traditional management, networking, human resources, and routine communication. In further understanding the differences between leaders and managers, it is useful to characterize managerial skills as technical, interpersonal, and conceptual. Technical are the skills required to do a specific job. Interpersonal is the ability to interact with others, and conceptual is the ability to see the big picture. Supervisors are often the best sources for operations needing new managers. This type of promotion from within works best when coupled with a thoughtfully executed management development program. A manager who begins as a supervisor and credits the organization for providing the tools needed to move up will be grateful and most likely very loyal. Researchers have proposed an ethics check for managers. They contend that every manager, in making a decision, should ask three questions. 1. Is it legal, or will I violate the laws or company policy? 2. Is it balanced, or is it fair to all concerned? And 3. How will it make me feel about myself, or will it make me proud? Will I fear that others might learn of my decision? The book referenced a 1993 discrimination case involving Denny's restaurants, where a table of African American Secret Service officers were denied service. If the managers in this store had asked themselves these questions, everyone would have been treated fairly and they would have not tarnished their company's name. Ethical violations regarding employees are more commonplace than violations related to guests. Unfortunately, the food service industry has a poor record when it comes to sexual harassment, pay and promotion discrimination, and employee privacy violations. Leaders and managers share a common need for integrity and ethics and must ensure that policies related to these areas are in place and are applied consistently to ensure safe, enjoyable workplaces. This has been Chapter 14, Leadership and Management by Cathy and Delano Scott.